Hey, this is Jack here at BCO Farm. I'm going to do a quick tour of the Swale project. It's late June and it's hot. It was 97 degrees yesterday and we haven't had a lot of rain. So some of the plants are starting to get a little stressed out, but we'll see how things are doing in the swale. I'm actually watering. Last month I put in some drip lines to all the trees. I try not to use it very much, but there's a lot of money invested in all these fruit trees, so you don't want to lose them. You can see over here I got another couple loads of wood chips, and I've been spreading some of those. The trees over, more established trees in the upper part of the yard, they seem to be doing okay, and they seem to be doing even better with the wood chips I put around them this spring. Keeps the moisture in, keeps the weeds down. So these are a couple of fig trees. This fig tree right here is a good example. It was probably the size of that one a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And when the upper swale went in about a year and a half ago, you can see it has really taken off. It just has access to a lot more water. And of course not right now, nothing does, but during the winter the swale fills quite often, and there's probably some pretty good root development because it should be going down and finding that water that's been percolating through the ground from the upper swale. Here the lower swale, it's a year behind the upper one, so hopefully it will look better next year. These two trees in the cages are pomegranates. I cage those because the deer like them, and I'm trying to give them a chance to get established better before they have to fight the deer, and the deer come around here a lot. That's the peach tree that gave us all the little peaches this year. That's a pawpaw, that's also caged. And all these trees were planted they were transplanted, they were 2-year-old bare root trees, put into the ground about February or March of last year, so maybe 15 or 16 months ago, and you can see they were all about the same size as these trees a year earlier. So that's what 1 year in the swale does for them. Of course, I think it was in the last video, but I've covered most of this area with wood chips. These are two cherry trees that seem to be favorites for the deer. They come around and chew on them all the time. You can see where the deer have been chewing up on the comfrey. I'm not worried about saving the comfrey because it's so easy to propagate. And if the deer eat some of that and maybe a little less of the fruit trees, that's a good thing. This is a goji berry. It actually produced one goji berry this year, and we ate that. Pear trees, peach trees. We got a couple peaches off these trees this year. They weren't good, but they did bear a couple fruit. This area in here, this is all red raspberry that has propagated from one plant. I put it in the ground last year. It sent out shoots, and then I started sticking those into the ground on the end, and they've produced more shoots. And we've actually gotten quite a few red raspberries, and they were really good. That's a blackberry. I know a lot of this looks bad because the grasses are starting to look terrible, and that's what's supposed to happen. It's part of the process of succession. Eventually this whole environment should evolve to where it's dominated by the trees, and then we'll have berries growing underneath it and comfrey, and I'm probably going to add Jerusalem artichoke this fall, and that'll be the bulk of all of it. And most other things will start to fade away, although we are trying to encourage clover like this to grow wherever we can. There's a cherry tree and an apple tree, a red bud, there's a blackberry. Those are also 2 cherry trees, just like the other 2, but for some reason the deer have not eaten these as much this year. So and those 2 trees were really chewed up by the deer last year, and they seem to be doing better. And then of course this is the phase 2 of the swale. The first swale, this got built last summer, about 11 months ago, so it's a little behind. And these trees all got put in this winter, so these fruit trees are all just 4 months in the ground, 2-year-old bare root trees. I've covered this entire area with sheet mulch, cardboard, wood chips. This just used to be a little island. It really looked like that area down there under the other pine tree, and now it looks like this. That's a fig, another fig. They were looking a little stressed, so that's why I'm watering today. And we really have had very little rain. We got, a week or so ago, we got enough rain that filled part of the upper swale, but nothing in the bottom swale. You can see everything is really looking dry. So down here on the lower swale, and that's what it looks like. That's a toilet. I had to replace a toilet in our house, and we were trying to figure out what to do with it, and that's how far I got with it right now. I actually sit there when I need to take a break. And that's what you can do when you don't live where there's an HOA. You can have a toilet in your front yard, and nobody can say anything about it. That's a plum tree that the deer tore up. They broke the whole top half of it off. They've eaten the limbs off several of these trees, so it'll be an interesting experiment to see if the swale environment saves them. We're just trying to get these trees through the summer. I did fill this swale manually from the pool pond about a week ago. I try not to do that too often, but I don't want it to go long periods without any water. The trees have drip, but I still want to keep permeating the ground with water slowly. And then when the fall comes, usually around November, December, we'll get tons of rain, and the swale will fill numerous times. And the hope is that that's what gets us through the seasons with minimal watering. Some of these, like that pear tree, looks really good. Usually the deer like the pear trees, but they've been staying away from them this year. Right over here is a big sweet gum limb that fell that I've got to get my chainsaw out and cut down. I came home last night and that had fallen, so I'm waiting for the cooler part of the day to cut that up. It did do some damage to this peach tree right here, and hopefully it will get through it. There you can see the deer ate the top off of that tree, and that one too. They've been rough on them. And I think I've described these plastic covers in the past, but they're real inexpensive, like a couple dollars each. They zip tie on, and they protect the trunks from the deer coming around and rubbing on them. Every fall the deer would rub the bark off all these older trees, and I thought it was a good idea to try to protect them, get them a better start early in their lives to get established. And it works. It doesn't protect the upper part, but it protects the trunk and it allows it to breathe. It also allows me in some places to put the chips right around the trunk and not risk the trunk getting rot, because the plastic keeps the chips off the trunk. Down here I planted some of the trees I got back in March. They're pecans, Chinese chestnuts, American persimmons, and pawpaws, and some apple trees. These were very inexpensive trees. They averaged about $3 a piece. So there's the tags I've started putting on the trees. I'm going to work on getting those on everything out here so I can walk around and remember what everything is. I think the deer have done too much damage to this apple tree. I'm going to start adding more chips, bring them farther down the hill. The hope is that the ground underneath these chips just stays moist longer after rains and encourages soil activity, earthworms, and over time will improve it. I even plan, as I get access to even more chips, I'll put thicker layers on this area between the swales, because I expect as I've described before, the long-term plan is there will be nitrogen fixers like honey locusts in these holes above the swales. And then this whole area between the swales will start to slowly be filled with various productive plants. By the way, the honey locusts, I've stopped transplanting them. I've got them all in pots now because they're I think I can get them to grow bigger this year and then transplant them in the fall. I actually bought some 3 and 5 gallon pots to transplant them into so they can develop bigger roots. And I'm not too worried about them getting root bound because they're not a tree we want out here for the long term. It's something to grow for a few years, fix nitrogen, chop and drop, and eventually they'll succeed out and be replaced with other things. So that's it. I'm going to get back to spreading wood chips. So from BCO Farm, this is Jack. We'll talk to you next time.